Alright, hello and welcome to the first ever video that is going to be on my blog site. I figured for this video what I'm going to do is kind of take my personal car and show parts locations on my car, which, fair warning, is not going to translate to every make and model, but having the visual and the names of parts should be able to kind of help you locate it on your own vehicle if you're trying to do maintenance, as well as being able to kind of just start building up a vocabulary for vehicle parts. So I guess we'll just go ahead and get into it. Alright, so if we go ahead and we open up the hood on my personal car, this is what we first see when you pop the hood on this. And to most people who don't understand what's going on, this is going to look like a jumble and kind of a mess of stuff. This is a very old car, or old in consideration to today, so a lot of things are done differently on this car. There's a lot of stuff kind of crammed in everywhere. I mean, we'll just start with basics. Battery location is going to probably be either on your passenger side or your driver's side on most car makes and models. Most of the time the terminals are going to be on the top. On my car, they happen to be on the back side of the battery, also right next to my coolant filling for your radiator. This is what keeps your car cool and causes it to not overheat. We also have in this corner my brake servo and brake fluid reservoirs. These are all lines that are ran to my brake pads to give me brake pressure on my rotors. The rest of the stuff on this side of the car, we have all of this is just kind of tubing and engine harness connections, some fuse stuff that mainly goes back to these two boxes right here, which are going to be our engine control units. These are going to be what tells your engine kind of how to run. It's where you have your tune for your car. It's a little bit more computer science kind of based stuff. A lot of modified cars that you'll see will have their ECUs taken out, recoded, redone, and then put back in. That's where you get what's called tuning or engine tuning. A lot of lines just kind of run back here. On this car, it's kind of hard to see because the engine is sat so far back in this engine bay. Right front and center. This is not the case on any other car I've worked on before. This is purely kind of special to my Pontiac, is that this big box in the front is my entire air filter. It is not going to be that way on every car. Like I said, most of the time your air filter is going to be a small box that's probably going to be over here. It's going to be a small tiny box with a small square filter. In my case, this being an older generation sports car, my air filter is a lot bigger than most cars. It's rectangular shaped. It's right up front. It runs through all this tubing, all these clips, straight through all this piping right back into my intake manifold. And my intake on top of my engine. Like I said, not going to be the case on every car. I also don't have the tools with me right now to pop open the box, otherwise I would, but the clamps can kind of be a pain to get on and off by yourself. One of the main reasons why when I'm working on cars, I like to have somebody else with me, because a lot of things in cars take two people, which you will find out very quickly. Connected to my air filter box is my water fill up, water for my radiator. This again is not going to be the thing on most cars because, like I said, this being a sports car, it does have a water cooled intercooler and radiator on it. I have not really needed to mess with any fluids on this car so far, just general fill up. Washer fluid reservoir is way up front on my car. If I was ever to get in an accident, this would get completely crumpled. But on most cars, it's going to be a reservoir, probably kind of back by your battery or in this general space. But for fluids, it's not really that hard to identify. You'll be able to kind of just look at them. Most of them are labeled. Here we see it's labeled washer fluid, coolant, engine oil is back there on the side of my engine, right on my engine cylinder heads and right above my manifolds. And then we're coming with oil. We also have the oil filter location. Your filter is going to be probably a little white rectangular or kind of circular tank. It's going to be on there super tight. So if you're trying to do your own oil changes, you are probably going to need what's called a belt wrench to get it off. A lot of the times they are Loctited on by some companies. The biggest thing is that they have an O-ring and a gasket on there that creates suction, so they don't come off. So it does take quite a bit to get them off. Over here is going to be both my fuse boxes. Normally your car will only have one. This car has two. This fuse box runs all my outside stuff, all my fuel pump, air pump, AC, starter, engine, and then this one is sort of all my inside, like horns, fans inside, radiator fans, as well as sort of my horn, fog lamp, headlights, etc. You shouldn't need to mess with fuses at any time doing maintenance unless you have a fuse that blows out on you. It's highly unlikely unless you're messing with electrical stuff, which is not really what you want to do when you're getting into beginner maintenance of cars. If you're doing beginner maintenance and you have electrical issues, I'd recommend just taking your car to someone. This is a big part of car maintenance. A lot of the times this, and especially with old cars, if you're working on old cars, this is your ABS pump and ABS servo. That stands for auto brake system. A lot of cars have this. It's a pretty standard on old and new cars. These will go out, these will leak. If you have brake issues, you probably have a brake fluid leak somewhere. All these little top parts are lines that run. You can see these two that are longer are gonna go all the way to the back of this car and give brake fluid and brake pumping to the back of the car. These shorter two are gonna run down and kind of tee off. They're gonna create a T, go to both front wheels, brake pads. Right next to this on this car is gonna be my power steering pump. Power steering, extremely important. It's what makes it so that your steering is easy and fluid. If you don't have power steering fluid, or if you have a power steering leak, over time you're gonna notice your car starts to get extremely hard to steer, and you're gonna be using all your force to steer. On this car, unfortunately, I am in the process of fixing a power steering leak as well as an ABS and brake fluid leak. I have to get to them, but that is sort of my current project that I need to work on. Getting through this engine bay is kind of horrendous, and it kind of requires the car to be up in the air. I do not currently have the tools to do that, so I'm sort of waiting on when I have access to a lift or to jack stands to do that. Oil, dipstick, checking oil, pretty important. A lot of the times your car is going to have, if you have oil issues, it's going to be either an oil leak or your car is going to be burning oil. So just every so often, pull out your dipstick, check it. Super easy to do, super easy to put back in. On this car, it's kind of a pain because there's a long tube that has a little bend in it to get my dipstick in and out, but check it every once in a while. You don't need to be meticulous about it, checking it every single time you open your car, but every so often checking it, because running your car without oil is the surefire way to lock it up, not blow up your engine, pretty much the whole 9 yards. This car right here, this is my brake fluid. This is connected to this ABS pump. The fluid comes through here, goes into this pump. It's what puts pressure on the brake pads that put pressure on your rotors from both sides to stop your car. These reservoirs, like I said, on most cars are going to be a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more upfront. This ABS pump on a lot of cars nowadays, what you'll see is it's stuck towards the side, or it's kind of drilled and slotted into the metal pieces, and it kind of just hangs in the back of your car. On this car right here, these kind of two huge green blocks on both sides of my engine bay are where my suspension sits. It's where these top bolts are actually the top of my suspension. This is where the top of the suspension spring or coil comes through. So not too much room in this car. It makes sense kind of why Pontiac did it this way. They needed space, so they had to move these reservoirs and pumps kind of out into the middle. Leaves not as much space over here, but there's a ton of space over here. They made it super easy to access oil filters, belts. These are serpentine belts. There's going to be all different kinds of belts, all different ribbings of belts, anywhere from 4 rib, 6 rib, 8 rib, 10 rib, etc. You're going to need to do research on kind of what your car needs. Most car websites or part websites, such as like AutoZone, O'Reilly, are going to have auto trackers where you can put in your make model. They'll tell you exactly what fits. Super easy, not much of a hassle. A lot of this wiring that you see, you don't really need to mess with. It's not going to be beginner maintenance stuff. It's mostly engine harness stuff, which is a lot of electrical side of things. Again, I personally do not mess with electrical stuff on cars. I am not an electrical engineer by any means. It kind of takes a little bit of extra skills to do some electrical stuff, some stuff that I'm a little too afraid to do on my own cars and on friend cars. So I'll take electrical issues to shops, to mechanics who know what they're doing. This silver stuff is pretty common to find all over the place. A lot of the time, if it sounds like your car is dragging something, or you hear like a dragging sound from your car, most likely going to be because this heat wrap has fallen off down below on some stuff, some wiring that's ran under the car. This heat wrap is extremely important. It keeps your car from melting all your wires. If I didn't have this on this car, it would melt all of these wires, which would cause a huge fuel leak for this car. Most of the time, this is the reason why cars catch on fire. They burn through fuel lines, or fuel lines come off. All 3 of these lines are actually fuel lines that go straight to these, which are my coil packs, and underneath those are your injectors. Your injectors are gonna be kind of small coil looking things. They are what shoot gas into your piston, into your cylinder of your engine, and it's basically what kind of gives your car gas and lubricates everything inside of it. Because if you don't have injectors working, or if you have clogged injectors, you're going to do what's called locking up your engine, and your engine is not going to want to start. Your car's not going to want to turn over at all. Nothing's going to happen. And the last biggest part in the engine bay is going to be this right here. This is the starter on my car. It's run down to my alternator, which is kind of buried in this car, but alternator and starters are what go out all the time. Every car I've owned in the past has had a starter or an alternator go out. Those are kind of your 2 issues a lot of the time. You need your alternator to be on because it's what charges your battery while you're driving, and it's what powers kind of all your stuff inside your car. Your starter is what gives your engine ignition, spark, which a lot of the time when you turn over, the way engines work, the piston kind of goes up and down, and when it goes down, it builds pressure. When it comes up, it hits that pressure, it ignites at the top, and like a little mini explosion. That's what gives your car power to run. There's a lot more kind of in and outs of engines, but to be honest, you don't really need to know a whole bunch when you're starting out car mechanics. If you're dealing with any issues digging into an engine, it's going to be a little bit harder. The nice thing with getting into mechanics and stuff is that there's so much guides, so many guides on YouTube, so many guides on Instagram, YouTube, online. Pretty much you look it up, you'll have a step-by-step guide. A lot of guides nowadays will include lists of parts you need for your car and parts you're gonna need, like tools you're gonna need. If you don't want to go out and buy tools, a lot of tool shops will rent you tools for periods of time, very cheap. It's what I do for a lot of tools. I have some beginner tools, some basic tools, some wrench sets and stuff, but when you're dealing with more advanced issues, a lot of the times you're going to need clamps, springs, vice grips, anything kind of in that nature. If you don't have it, go rent it or find a friend who has it. I know I got a lot of my parts and tools from my dad, who just kind of has them laying around from doing a bunch of maintenance on old Jeeps and stuff, as well as friends of mine who I work on cars with. I've kind of just built up a collection of tools over time. The other thing that I want to show, but I'm not sure how well I'm going to be able to do it because it requires putting your car onto a lift most of the time and taking the tires off. I don't have a lug nut wrench or lug nut bit with me right now, and I'm not sure how well it's going to film, but suspension parts are fairly simple. A lot of the time you're going to be kind of down here, and unfortunately it is not going to show. I don't have lighting, but for your suspension components, you're going to have lower control arms, upper control arms, tie rods, axles. You shouldn't really need to mess with that a whole bunch, unless of course you break an axle. Axle replacement's pretty easy. You just take your tire off, you unbolt the axle from the hub and the rotor, pull the axle out of your differential, and that's pretty much it. With suspension stuff, it gets pretty dangerous because a lot of the times you're dealing with your suspension screws, as well as your suspension has what's called a coil or a spring on it. It is extremely tight on there. There's a lot of pressure. There are special tools to do suspension. However, suspension is something that is very dangerous. It's very much not loved in the car community. Even advanced mechanics that I know who have do this as their job will get terrified of doing suspension because the coils can shoot off at immense rates. There's so much pressure on them. I recommend, if you need to do suspension stuff, if you're going to do upgraded suspension, take it to a mechanic or someone who is way more experienced and has the tools and to do it, because the last thing you want to do is shoot a spring off at double digits worth of PSI and hit somebody, break something, the whole 9 yards. It's going to get dangerous. And then the last part of this is we will walk to the back of the car, and the back of your car is going to be on most cars where your tools are, such as your spare tire, your jack stands. A lot of the times they'll include a wrench for you to kind of get your tire stuff together. And in case you have tire issues, you're gonna need tools to deal with it. This car, again, completely different than other cars. It's completely changed around. Most of the time, your tools and stuff are gonna be buried under your carpet in the back of your car. It's gonna be super simple. Just pull up your carpet, pull out the jack, pull out the tools, you're ready to go. In this car, everything is tucked in the back corner under this panel. It's got 3 bolts to take off that you just use the car key for. You twist them to the unlock position, you pull this whole panel / inner fender off, and that's where my jack, my spare tire, my tools are. In this car, they're all back here because the tops on this car are actually old school T-tops. They come off, and then there's slots in the back of my car for the T-tops to sit in. So everything's tucked back here. It's sort of a pain to do alone, as well as the previous owner of this car put in this huge subwoofer box, which kind of gets in the way of maintenance a lot of the time. But yes, your brake tools, everything you're going to need to do tire changes are going to be in the back. It's not going to be that hard to kind of do. I think that is mostly it for identifying beginner parts. Most of the time you're going to be dealing with minor issues such as dead batteries, replacing batteries. Super simple. If you are working on anything in the car, like inside the car, anything around airbags, it's pretty much a general rule of car maintenance to disconnect your battery. Even if you're not working on anything electrical related, I always do it for just calmness of mind. I just always, to make myself feel personally safer, I always disconnect my battery. That way, if something happens to go funky, I'm not gonna get an airbag in my face. If I'm working on the inside, I'm not gonna get a fire going. I'm not gonna spark something on my electrical system. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, most car brands nowadays are going to be a little bit more streamlined, a little less cluttered. This being an old 90s sports car, it wasn't built with the same standards as today. But I still love her as a car. Still getting worked on. Like I said, I have a bunch of projects and stuff. The other issue that I just remembered you're going to deal with a lot of the time is under the engine at the very bottom you have what's called your oil pan. It's kind of down by that oil filter that I showed earlier. A lot of the times cars are going to have oil pan leaks. This car has one. It's a very slow leak. There's a few bolts holding on your oil pan. There's going to be some like silicone putty or like some light glue that's kind of holding it on, because underneath or inside your oil pan there's a gasket, another gasket. Those gaskets can blow out, they can break, they can crack, that's what causes them to leak. Or if you're driving and you hit a speed bump, a rock, etc., you can put a hole in your oil pan and then you get what's called an oil leak. This car has a very slow oil leak. I need to get it up on a lift again to do kind of all the leak check and stuff, which should be getting done soon. But I believe that is it. I'm running out of daylight here a little bit, so I'm sorry if it's kind of hard to see stuff. I will probably end up refilming a few bits and pieces of this when I have better daylight. But just to kind of go back over a general run through of things: battery terminals on the back or top, most of the time top. This is a super old battery, also needs to get replaced. Coolant, oil, engine oil. Always want to keep your fluids in your car up, done. This car I just did an oil change on. I bought this car back in July. Was not sure when the oil had last been changed. Did an air filter swap on this car because the air filter was completely gunked up, filled up with stuff, mostly just dust and stuff that kind of collects through the car over time, as well as a lot of ash and stuff from the wildfires. And fuse boxes, shouldn't really need to deal with these. The nice thing is, a lot of the times too, they will include some extra fuses, like fuses that they know are common to blow out. There will be extras on the side of these boxes. ABS pump, power steering pump, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, let me know if you guys want to see another video, or if you want to see me go more into depth, get this car up on a lift and kind of go up over the underside of it, or the suspension of it. Kind of hard to do. If I had a jack, I could just jack it up and kind of get under there, but I do not. I'm filming this on top of a parking garage, unfortunately. But yeah, just give me some feedback on the video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.